How has democratic participation developed in the EU? What efforts have to be made so the Union will be more transparent and democratic? The EU series, Looking Back, Looking Ahead, looks at the debates about social participation in the EU and the future of the Union. Democracy is an indispensable component of the canon of values of the European Union, a prerequisite for the legitimacy of European politics and for its acceptance by the citizens. At the same time, the shape of the European democratic process is the subject of lively debates, because the more directly the citizens of the EU are involved in the decisions of the Union, the more powerful it becomes in relation to the nation states. What should cooperation between the EU and its member states look like against this background? How many options for action must, want, and are member states allowed to give up? And how should national sovereignty in the EU be shaped in the future? How can the decision and procedures of the European institutions be made more transparent and legitimized even better? Since the beginning of European integration, the EU and its predecessors have been criticized for lacking direct democratic legitimation. Indeed, the then European coal and steel community was initially shaped by indirect democratic legitimation. In so-called executive federalism, the legitimacy of political action resulted from the legitimation of the democratically elected national European governments. Not only the representatives in the Council of Ministers were sent by the governments, but also the members of the predecessors of today's European Parliament, the Parliamentary Assembly of the ECSC, were selected by the national parliaments of the member states in the first few years. That changed only in 1979, when the citizens of the EC were called for the first time to directly appoint the members of the European Parliament, whose designation as such was only recognized by the member states in 1986. Since then, the powers of Parliament have slowly but surely expanded, often at the initiative of the parliamentarians themselves. Politically, however, for a long time the House only had the right to propose amendments to legislative proposals, without these being binding on the Council of Ministers. That changed in 1992 with the Maastricht Treaty, which introduced the so-called co-decision procedure and the possibility of committees of inquiry. As important as the Maastricht reforms were at the beginning of the 1990s, the question of how the EU as a whole could be made closer to the citizens, more transparent and more democratic, was still evident. In intensive negotiations with the Treaty of Amsterdam in 1999 and the Treaty of Nice in 2003, significant progress was made, such as an extension of the co-decision procedure to almost all policy areas. Nevertheless, the EU project needed further reforms, and still does, and that's no easy undertaking. A constitution for Europe had not received approval in several national referendums, and the process of further European unification seemed to be stalling. On the other hand, the internal pressure was great. The Union had grown significantly in the meantime, and with it, the expectations of the citizens. The growing critical voices that portrayed the EU as a bureaucracy without democratic legitimation also had to be taken into account. The third attempt to fundamentally reform the EU after Amsterdam and Nice finally brought about the breakthrough. On December 13, 2007, the heads of state and governments of the EU signed the Treaty of Lisbon, with which far-reaching changes were made for the entire structure of the Union. The preamble makes it clear what this is all about. The treaty will be concluded with a desire to enhance the process initiated by the Amsterdam and Nice treaties, which will increase the efficiency and democratic legitimacy of the Union and improve the coherence of its actions, and that should be completed. In order to achieve the stated goal of increasing democratic legitimacy, the competences of the EU Parliament, with the exception of foreign and security policy, were expanded and placed on a par with the Council of the European Union. Parliament also had the final say on the expenditure side of the EU budget. The strengthening of the national parliaments, which have since been able to reject EU legislative procedures if they see the principle of subsidiarity being violated, was also of great importance. Further measures that were implemented with the Treaty of Lisbon concern the decision-making in the Council of the European Union, which has had to be carried out with a double majority since 2014. Accordingly, the adoption of a decision requires a majority of the states, 55% of them, which must also represent a majority of the population of 65%. Even a plebiscitary element was introduced with Lisbon. With the European Citizens Initiative, the EU Commission can be forced to deal with the topic and to work out a legislative proposal. The prerequisite is that this request has been signed by at least 1 million people from different member states. A look back shows the long way the EU has already come in terms of transparency and democratic legitimacy over the past 3 decades. The strengthening of the European Parliament has significantly increased the democratic legitimacy. It still has a way to go there, though. The new transparency of the institution is evident not least from the fact that the meetings of the councils of ministers are sometimes held in public. However, the process of European unification is far from over, and not just in terms of democratic legitimacy. At the heart of the Europe-wide discussions is the question, where is the European Union headed in the long term? The debate about the ever closer ties between the member states takes up only one aspect among many. In view of a rapid global change and epochal challenges such as coping with climate change and the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, European answers are urgently needed, for example in the field of economics or the use of new technologies. This is where the Conference on the Future of Europe comes in. This is a proposal by Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The aim of the project is to actively involve citizens in all EU member states in the discussion about the common future of Europe. They should be able to contribute their ideas about what the EU should look like in 5 or 10 years. For example, it can be about the future of the European economic and social model, sustainability and climate protection, innovation and digitization, or the basic values of the EU. The question of what lessons Europe is drawing from the COVID-19 pandemic can also be addressed. The Conference on the Future of Europe is to be supported by the institutions of the Union, that means Council, Parliament and Commission, together with the Member States and organized throughout the EU. The German Council Presidency is working to ensure that the Conference on the Future of Europe can start work as quickly as possible in the form of whatever form the COVID-19 pandemic allows. Other EU-wide projects, such as the European Commission's European Democracy Action Plan, are intended to help not only improve the conditions for a lively democracy at European level, but also concrete measures to deal with current challenges for democratic participation, such as seizing disinformation on the internet. Many of the EU's achievements and regulations can only be understood by looking at their long history. They were taking the informal councils and other events during the German EU Council presidency as an opportunity to take a look back at the emergence of different policy areas in the European Union. And at the same time they asked, how can the EU develop further in this area? And we all in the EU, we citizens we are asked to take part in this discussion and to force the parts of the EU that will decide in the end, the Commission, the Council and the Parliament, to deal with it. And if you want to stay informed, please subscribe to my channel and my other channels. I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.